The HOA president was arrested right inside the hospital, caught on camera tampering with my son's IV pump just minutes before surgery. Her excuse: "Staffing is short, I'm helping out." The doctor called the police before I could even process it. And that's how my quiet suburban nightmare reached its breaking point. But if you really want to understand how we got there, I have to take you back to where it started at 3 in the morning when everything went dark. It was a Tuesday, the kind of night where the world feels half asleep and the air outside is thick and still. I woke to a shriek that didn't belong in a home, a metallic mechanical sound like a robot bird being strangled. It came from the medical equipment beside my son's bed. My wife, Lisa, was already moving before I even sat up. "Power's out," she said. "Backup battery's running, but the main line is dead." Our son, Kane, was 14 and preparing for major surgery that week. The machine by his bed, a nutrient pump, kept him stable at night. Without it, his body chemistry would spiral. We had a hospital-issued backup generator and an uninterruptible power supply, but neither lasts long. I stumbled out to check the circuit breaker. Everything was fine. Except outside, under the weak beam of my flashlight, I saw it. The power line feeding our house had been cut. Not chewed, not frayed. Cut clean, like someone used garden shears. The copper wires glinted in the dark, and for a second I just stood there, cold sweat crawling up my spine. Someone had come onto our property in the dead of night right under our son's window and deliberately killed the power to his medical device. Lisa came out half asleep, half furious. When she saw the severed cord, her face went blank, her version of rage. "That's not random," she said quietly. I could only nod. We didn't even have to say who we suspected. By dawn, I had the line patched up with some electrical tape and prayer when I noticed an envelope stuck to the front door. The HOA logo glared up at me, Whitehurst County Homeowners Association. The violation read, "Unapproved exterior wiring and visible conduit modification. Fine $100. And the signature at the bottom, that jagged, sharp scrawl I knew too well. Karen Deacon, HOA President. Lisa stepped beside me, coffee in hand, and read the notice. $100 for saving our kid's life, she said flatly. She must have been watching. I checked the timestamp, 5:15 a.m. I'd finished the repair at 5:10. That meant she'd been outside waiting, spying from the shadows, watching us panic, then fining us for it. That's when I realized this wasn't about rules. It was about control. About her. Karen and I used to work together years ago at the county planning department. Back then, she was sharp ambitious and lonely. When I made it clear I was happily married, something in her eyes went cold. A few months later, I left for a new job and thought that was the end of it. 10 years later, we bought this house, and there she was again. Same sharp smile, new name, clipboard in hand. Tim Tuttle, she'd said at the HOA barbecue, what a small world. From that day on, she made my life a slow, quiet war. Notices for trash cans being out 11 minutes too long. Warnings about non-compliant basketball hoop color. A fine for a tiny oil stain on my driveway. Petty, relentless, precise. And now she'd crossed into something darker. That morning, Lisa and I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by crumpled papers and wires. "She's testing us," Lisa said. "Seeing how far she can go." I wanted to brush it off to believe this was still neighborhood nonsense, but when your child's life depends on a machine someone just sabotaged you, stop giving people the benefit of the doubt. The next blow came fast. The day the ambulance arrived for a scheduled pre-surgery test run, the paramedics called me from the gate. "Sir, the code isn't working." I gave them the same 4-digit code we'd used for years. "Still says access denied," one of them said. Lisa checked the HOA portal. Karen had changed every resident's access codes at 6 that morning. No notice, no explanation. Standing there at the locked gate, I realized what she was doing. She wasn't just harassing us, she was isolating us. First, she cut our power. Now she was cutting off help. That night, I felt hollow. I wanted to protect my family. But how do you fight someone who hides behind bylaws and bureaucracy? For a moment, I wondered if maybe I was overreacting, if this was all in my head, just a neighborhood drama. I was blowing out of proportion. But then I looked at Kane's room, the quiet machine that kept him stable, and remembered that clean, deliberate cut in the wire. No, this wasn't paranoia. This was real. Lisa refused to let it go. She spent the night gathering evidence photos, timestamps, access logs. The next morning, we were in court filing for an emergency protective order. I hated courtrooms, the smell of stale coffee, and desperation. But we didn't have a choice. Lisa laid out everything with engineer precision. The judge listened, flipped through our folder, and finally stamped the order Karen Deacon to remain 100 yards away from us, our home, and our son. It was a small victory, a piece of paper, but for the first time I felt a little safer. That feeling didn't last long. 2 nights later, my neighbor buddy Eli, a retired sheriff, invited me over. "Heard about your trouble," he said, setting down his iced tea. "You know I've got cameras pointed down that street, right?" He showed me footage from the night of the power cut. At 2:42 a.m., a dark sedan rolled slowly down the block with its lights off. A figure in a dark hoodie stepped out, disappeared between my house and the bushes, then came back 3 minutes later. Buddy paused, the frame zoomed in, enhanced it like some CSI magic, and there it was, the county recycling sticker on the bumper, same as the one on Karen's Lexus. That was the first time I felt like the tide could turn. We weren't crazy. We weren't helpless. We had proof. Then came surgery day. We gave the hospital copies of the protective order and Karen's photo. The staff reassured us, "You're safe here." But safety is a fragile thing. Kane was prepped for surgery, calm as always. The nurses were kind, efficient. Then a quiet alarm started beeping on the IV pump. A nurse silenced it, just a flow notification, but the surgeon, Dr. Evans, happened to walk in. He checked the screen, then froze. "Who set these dosage parameters?" he asked. The nurse looked confused. "I did, sir." His voice turned cold. "Check again. The decimal point's off. It's set to deliver 10 times the prescribed dose." The room went silent. 10 times. "That's not a mistake. That's a death sentence." He locked the machine, sealed it as evidence, and ordered the police. "This isn't human error," he said. "This is sabotage." A code gray was announced, hospital lockdown. Kane's room became a crime scene. Lisa, ever the tech mind, asked security for the hallway footage. We scrubbed through the past hour, and then Lisa stopped the video. There she said. A woman in a bright red sweater wearing a volunteer badge walked out of our son's room. She turned slightly toward the camera. It was Karen. The detective radioed out the alert. "Suspect is a white female, late 50s, shoulder-length, blonde hair, red sweater. Name Karen Deacon. Do not approach armed and dangerous." The hospital erupted into controlled chaos. Officers swept the floor doors, locking behind them. I stood by the window, fists clenched, heart pounding. And then I saw movement down the hall. A fire door slowly closing. "She's in the stairwell," I shouted. The detective and 2 officers bolted. Without thinking, I followed. My knees hated every step, but adrenaline doesn't care about age. When I reached the landing, she was there trapped between floors, the red sweater glowing under the emergency lights. She saw me and screamed, "You ruined my life." Her voice echoed off the concrete. I don't know where my calm came from, but I said, "You did this to yourself, Karen." She lunged, not at the cops, but at me. One officer grabbed her arm, she slipped the clipboard, hit the rail, and the handcuffs clicked. Just like that, it was over. They led her past me, wrists, bound face twisted with fury and humiliation. I'll never forget the way she looked at me like I'd stolen something that was never hers to begin with. The rest unraveled fast. Police searched her house, found her phone filled with messages, plans, rants, even the words, "Phase 1 complete. Let's see how they handle a little darkness." They traced her car from Buddy's footage, confirmed she'd entered the hospital with a stolen volunteer badge. Every detail fell into place like dominoes. The HOA board called an emergency meeting. For once, the neighborhood showed up. People told stories, fines for holiday lights, threats over mailboxes, bullying retirees. Karen had terrorized everyone. By the end of the night, they stripped her title, dissolved her membership, and voted in new rules, one of them named after my son, Kane's Law. From now on, medical needs would always override aesthetics. When the trial came, she didn't even fight. The evidence was a mountain. The judge called her actions an act of calculated cruelty born from resentment and pride. 20 years. Minimum 15 before parole. Lifetime no contact order. And when the gavel hit the desk, I didn't feel joy. Just silence. The kind that comes when a storm finally stops. Karen was led out in cuffs, still glaring, still hating. But for the first time, her hate didn't mean anything. I stood there watching her disappear through the side door and realized something simple but powerful. When someone uses power to harm, the only real way to fight back is with truth proof and the law. You don't scream, you don't stoop, you just stand your ground and let justice speak for you.